Nick Triolo, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Brendan. Nice to see you.
Um, Boy, I've been waiting to have you on this podcast for quite a while now. This is episode 20. Um, can you? Yeah, exactly. I'm committed. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are in your current iteration?
Yeah, I am a writer, editor, runner, emergent wannabe educator, doing some more teaching as of late, and currently living in Missoula, not too far from Brendan Leonard himself.
Mm-hmm.
We should be doing this in person, but we're a bike ride away. And yeah, that's that's the gist of where I find myself these days. Thinking a lot about letters, thinking a lot about books, and spending a lot of time on foot these days. Fewer miles FKTing and more miles walking and sleeping in the dirt.
I also would add that people actually pay you to teach, so you're not like an emergent teacher. You're paid to teach writing. Also, you're an award-winning author as of a few weeks ago. I'm pretty sure. Do you have what's the name of your book? People reading that thing? What is it?
The book is called The Way Around: A Field Guide to Going Nowhere. And I'll say that, and this is not a plug, sort of is a plug. It's coming out in paperback in October. We've redesigned the cover, and they suggested that we recast the subtitle. So, not that anyone cares, but the subtitle, as it stands currently in the hardcover, is A Field Guide to Going Nowhere, which my dad was always like, "Who's going to want to read a book about that?" Um, like, you want to go somewhere, right? And I'm like, "Pop, you got to read the book. It'll make sense." But the paper book subtitle is A Walk Reimagined, and
Oh yeah.
so yeah.
What's the new cover? It's just like you shirtless, black and white.
Six pack abs, kind of like the Men's Health style, black and white, really ribbed abs.
Okay, well, boy, I'll buy it. I'll buy another copy.
Yeah, it's gonna sell like hotcakes.
Yeah.
It's actually like a really buoyant sort of like, I don't want to say like Ross Gay Book of Delights, but it's like way more like light blues and yellows, and like it's not as dark and sort of self-important or something. What's the word? Like, not self-important, but like I actually really love the hardcover art. I love the black and yellow contrast, but it feels like kind of like really earnest or something. It feels really like sharp. And so I feel like the paperback is giving it a little levity, which I think was the point.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, that'll be fun. I'll have to buy some more copies of that.
Which is actually it's celebrating its 1 year anniversary tomorrow. So I'm gonna put out a little Substack tomorrow. I don't know when this is gonna come out. So
Happy birthday, book. Yeah.
thank you.
We might be. I think it'll be a week and a half from now. So
Okay.
yeah. So it'll be a little over a year old. So, as you know, this podcast is called My Favorite Thing. So I've asked you to send me a list of 5 of your favorite creative works throughout your life, and you first sent me 6, which is I'm happy you trimmed it down to 5 on your own, because I would have had a hard time choosing. But let's talk about the first item on your list, which is the book Spell of the Sensuous by David Abram.
David Abram, yeah. So I don't know how many listeners will know of this book. I feel like sometimes when I see people post about it these days, I'm like, where have you been? This thing's been around for 30 years. But I think that I got to it fairly late in the game. David Abram is a philosopher, cultural ecologist, and he's also a sleight of hand magician, which is kind of an interesting fact, which you'll read about in the book. And he wrote this book. I didn't know this until I was preparing for this call, that it was published in '96. So we're looking at a 30-year anniversary of this book, which is wild. Wow. He is a visiting lecture writer at the Harvard Divinity School. In fact, there's a fantastic conversation between David and Terry Tempest Williams that you can find on YouTube that maybe we'll link to. he writes, the book is essentially about how language is animate, how he gets into like the history of the alphabet, and how the written language is both something that is something that is an invitation to deepen our intimacy with the world, and also a distancing, a potential like distancing factor, where language was historically an oral tradition or storytelling, and so with that came a deeply embodied somatic phenomenological, like it was a deeply transmitted through the body and through the senses, and we gathered to listen to stories, and they were sort of the permutations of story through time. The subjective response to a metabolism of stories became this sort of like living creature. And as soon as we started writing these kind of these ink splotches on paper that were sort of representative of images, it became sort of this evolutionary abstraction from the real, from actually like we made sort of language inert in some ways by creating an alphabet. And so it's this kind of interesting conversation about language, both its animacy and vitality, and how urgent and necessary it is to get right, and also how potentially like weaponizing or distancing it can be, or estranging, like the estrangement of language to between us and the real and the living world. And so I don't know, I just remember it rocking my world. I was in my 20s, living in Portland, Oregon. I was running like way too many miles every week. It was a moment in my life where I was really getting into ultra running. And also like didn't have internet where I lived. I lived under this, this old like 80-year-old woodcarver from Hawaii, up in Forest Park. And she like rented me her little daylight basement, and it didn't have internet, and I had like terrible internet. And so I just would read like crazy. And so I would like run and read. There was a trail 30 seconds from my door, and there was no internet. And so I just did a lot of things. And I was working at a nonprofit job and I like worked at Red Robin at some point, like right in there, and which we talked about, serving tables at Red Robin. And so I was not making a bunch of money, and just wolfing down this canon that I'd never really heard about, but was really interested in, about environmental writing, or reading sort of Gary Snyder and starting to get into like eco-psychology. So without getting too far into that rabbit hole, David Abram, Spell the Sensuous, was one of these books that was recommended by people in the canon, friends of mine who started sharing books. It just kind of kept circulating, and he's since written a book called Becoming the Animal, which was great also. And he hasn't written anything for about a decade that I've seen in terms of book length, but he has a couple of great essays on emergence. And he's just a wonderful thinker.
So you have a copy of this book. Is this a copy? Did you borrow this from somebody and never give it back, or like where did this come from?
I had a friend in grad school who didn't pay rent for 3 years. He lived in a school bus. He's one of the most brilliant people I know. Like I would call him in the dead of winter, like in February, and be like, "Hey, Chris, how are you doing in your bus without heat?" And he's like, "I'm under 2 feet of blankets right now, and they're all frozen, and I can't get out of my bus because." But he was this like, he had like a master's in physics, and he had a stack of masters, and just this sort of, he would like eat bugs. Like he's a really curious dude, but he borrowed this book, and this looks like him. Like it looks like it's just got, he like used it as a pillow. There's like, I don't know if you've seen Merlin Sheldrake's book on mushrooms, but Merlin Sheldrake did this experiment where he like he inoculated his own book and grew mushrooms out of it. And this feels similar. Like there might be some mycelium running through this thing. So this isn't, I don't even know what happened to this copy, but it's a beautiful thing. It's living. It's a living book.
So
like.
That's Chris's book.
Yeah. I don't know if it's my book and I lent it to him and he gave it back, but nonetheless, it went through his world.
It doesn't matter. It's not from the Portland Public Library.
It's not. It is not.
That when you I have not read this book, but when I read the description of it and kind of flipped through the first couple pages that are online, I was like, this sounds like a Nick book, in that sort of like Rob Macfarlane analysis of language in a beautiful, beautiful manner, painting with words as paintbrushes, sort of thing. How do you think? How do you think that comes in? Like, does this book influence what you do now, in some way? Do you think?
Yeah, it's funny. I was listening to your beautiful conversation with Heather, and I heard you talk about this person you ran into on the trail, a friend of yours who also likes to write. I think it might have been me. I can't be for sure, but you said something like, "This dude, writes with the paintbrush, and I write like with the screwdriver." Which I love. I've admired your work forever. Of course, I don't need to, blow too much smoke on this call, but I do understand and love that we have different approaches to this craft. That's like what makes it cool. I learn from you every day because of it. And David Abram has sort of calibrated my approach to language. Calibrated, what a big clunky word, right? Don't use big words. Shunk and white. But I also love language I love language that's kind of big and sometimes when done right. And so it's a yes and. I think David Abram is activating the animacy of language in the mouth, and how can language be, he inspired me to write this essay that I wrote recently about air saloons, about selling air, like air bars in Vegas, etc. And David Abram talks a lot about the animacy of air, the commonwealth of breath, as he says. And that kind of language, and I love his, it's really, it plays tricks. It like casts spells, to call it in the title. And so you can do that way too thick, and it's terrible, of course. And then, so it's a play of discernment, I think. But David Abram, Solnit was another, I don't know why I'm putting them in the same necessarily category, but Rebecca Solnit was also a voice at that time that really helped me both write nonfiction with rhythm and specificity and precision to language. It took me a while to actually really heed the advice to read more, Hemingway, or read really beautifully Platonic stripped down language that is getting to the point and getting to it immediately. And so I don't know where I live between those two poles, but David Abram and that sort of tradition got me into this language salad that is reflective of the natural world and all its nuances. That's what Macfarlane writes a lot about in Landmarks. We're losing cultural and linguistic diversity, and so is it a form of activism or a form of reclamation to relearn how these words feel in our mouths? These 16 different words to describe ice or something. So.
Oh yeah. You've told me before that it was like a composition class you took in college that you did so poorly in that the professor just wrote on your paper, "Go to the writing center." were your early writings that were maligned by this professor? Was it like you trying out lots of beautiful language, or what was going on there? And that?
Yeah, probably. There's a story that I won't expand, but just give it 15 seconds here. But my mom who would always tell me the story where they would as a kid, they would get high after I went to bed and read some of the stories that I would write to submit to kindergarten, or not kindergarten, I don't know, second grade or something. Because what I would do, I got a hold of the dictionary or the thesaurus, and I would splice in these crazy words like vicarious, or I don't even know, and no child of that age, and they would just love it. They thought it was the funniest thing ever. And so flash forward to freshman year in college, I just was a terrible writer, straight up. No other, I just didn't know what the F I was doing. And so this international relations professor from Harvard got my first paper on the UN or some shit, and he was like, "This is ungradable. There was no red ink because he couldn't even know where to start. That's how bad it was." So in some ways, I said this on book tour. That was 2001. I'm like, this book is dedicated to Graham Otten, the professor who told me that I need to go to the writing center, and I went, okay.
Is he around still?
Yeah, yeah. He
You
is.
send him send him a copy of the book?
I should. You know, I'm gonna make that note right now.
Just a little post-it. Thanks for telling me to go to the writing center in 25 years ago.
In all sincerity, I bet that would be a lovely thing to receive.
Oh my God, that would be hilarious. Just close the loop.
Yeah.
I bet that'd be great because you never hear from your students, you know?
Totally.
That's interesting. Okay. Next, you know, what's funny is the on your list of possible things that we were going to include, I was a little disappointed you went with the higher brow sort of thing with Spell of the Sensuous instead of the R.L. Stine books. But maybe I'll just throw that in the links anyway.
You know, I was about to put. I saved. You know, a few of these are funny or a little more like self-poking, but R.L. Stine was like a huge influence. You know, these things were like, you know, like I was interviewed by Pal's Books and like, what's your kind of formative book that really turned you on to literature? And it's true, and I mean this. And this sounds totally like pretentious, but the like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment was in fact a book that like my high school AP English teacher, you know, gave me to read, and it totally rocked my world for sure. But the real reading started with R.L. Stine. R.L. Stine, absolutely Goosebumps. Like that's when transported. Nobody prescribed it to me. You know, I just couldn't. I was waiting at the bookstore. You know, I knew when the new book came to town. I lived in a small town in the Sierra Foothills, and I could smell the wood of the bookshelf in this place. I know exactly. You walk in to the right, Goosebumps, and so R.L. Stine, absolutely. So R.L. Stine to Spell of Sensuous. That pipeline is. You heard it here first.
I'm happy to let that in as a bonus pick there. That's fun. Okay, well, technically this is number 2. Music, Darkside, Psychic. Where are you when you find this music, and how does it come into your life?
Yeah, so this is an interesting record. I actually have it right here for those who are watching.
Oh, wow.
Look at me all prepared. It's a beautiful record. I have it on vinyl. Psychic came out in 2013, and that's when I found it. I was actually, fast forward, sort of moved myself out of Portland after sort of big life transition, and landed a sort of a house sitting job on the southern tip of Baja, Mexico, for a winter. So like for 4 or 5 months. And I met this woman who was dating a pretty famous like Scandinavian DJ. And I think she was their sort of publicist or sort of tour manager or something. There are 2 twin brothers, and they're like famous in the like the house music scene, which is not my scene. Like I grew up on punk rock, you know, and yet this woman was amazing, and these 2 brothers were just kind of quirky, and all they would do, they would not surf. Like I went there to like run in the desert, to get in the ocean as much as I could. I was volunteering at like a turtle rehabilitation thing, and I was building this like protest to stop a gold mine, which we could talk about. But these guys were like spent all day inside. Like they didn't go outside. They didn't do the thing that people do when they go to Todos Santos. They sat in their closet and were like just making beats all day. And I kind of loved that. So I would go and like hang out with them. And she one day sent me this link and was like, based on what I know about you, Nick, this band is the perfect sort of signature that meets the hybridity of you. The sort of like you love punk rock and you love rock and roll, and you also seem to love the sort of rhythmic beats of house that I was sort of getting into because of these people. And so Darkside is this beautiful electronic duo between Nicholas Jars, a famous Chilean electronic musician, and the multi-instrumentalist Dave Harrington. They met at Brown. They're 2 sort of brilliant folks, and they started putting out music in like 2011. So I was there in the winter basically of 2013 when Psychic, this record, came out. If anybody's listening hasn't ever heard of these people, which I find a lot of people haven't, but those who have, like, there's a little bit of like we see each other. I read somewhere in a review that like they're sort of like krautrock meets club. It was like a cool, weird qualifier. So it's Paper Trails would be a beautiful intro to this band. That's what introduced me to their music. And so if you're into the sort of rhythmic consistency of electronic music, but also love the sort of riffy rock um, inputs, then you might love this band. And they've put out a couple records since Psychic that I'm less fond of, but they're all pretty experimental. And so yeah, so I was basically like, as I was transitioning from a time in Portland, Oregon, sort of like in a sort of a ultra running identity and getting into writing and reading a bunch. I was considering grad school, and this sort of interstitial sort of moment living in Mexico, which sort of delivered me, the soundtrack of this record delivered me to where I am now, which is in Missoula, where I came to grad school in 2013.
Yeah, you're going from rainforest, essentially, rainy Pacific Northwest, to dry desert Baja.
That's it.
Was this like their first album that came out?
They put an EP out, which is really good, actually. There's a track, A1, I think is the track, that like I've listened to at least a bazillion times. I mean, it's so good. So a little EP, I think, right when they first started collabing, and then 2013, Psychic comes out, and it's like a full length record. In fact, I mentioned this whole campaign to stop this gold mine. There was a track on this record. I forget the name of the track, but I couldn't stop hearing it and thinking about this. So we basically designed a 70-mile run across the Baja Peninsula to stop this gold mine with a bunch of Mexican activists. And the whole song, I when I listen to it, I think of this route. I think of the actual route from the east side of the Baja Peninsula to Todos Santos. And I kept hearing it. I was like, it kind of has this little bridge in the middle. It feels like this summit, this sort of like cresting little saddle summit that you have to go over. And so every time I'd listen to it, and I was listening to this record, I would listen to this track, and I would see the landscape of this crossing and of this campaign we were building. And so it ends up that we end up using that track in this short, low budget film that we created called The Crossing, that comes out in 2014. And we reach out to the band. They give us rights. They give us rights. They ask a bunch of money for us, and we're like, we have no money. And then we send them the trailer that we made, and they were like, cool, like go ahead and use it. And so we have a Darkside track in this film, as a function of falling in love with this album.
And that's so great when they do that.
Yeah.
Tom Rosenthal, the British musician, was pretty famous for just like letting you have music for basically $1, and it became like this sort of, for a period of several years, it was in all these adventure films. And I reached out to him at one point and was like, hey, can I use this for a little trailer for my book? And he's like, yeah, just send me a copy of the book. So I did. But yeah, another friend was like, oh yeah, for sure, Tom Rosenthal like literally gave me this track for $1.
That's incredible.
It is cool. And they don't lose anything by it, but like, I mean, they lose potential money, obviously, but like, sometimes if you're able to reach them without going through, sort of money manager person, it can be really cool. That's a great story.
I think that Ben Gibbard also submitted, contributed a track or two for that film. He's extremely generous and a dear friend, but he knew more than anyone how we were in the red on that film entirely. Like, we did a bit of a crowdfunder, but it was like a couple thousand. Like, I think we spent $3,000 or $4,000 on that film or something. Like, and none of it. There was no pocketed money whatsoever. So it was all for this thing. So that helps.
Yeah, that's great. All right, number 3. That's your only music pick too. That's good. You kind of did a bunch of different art forms here. Number 3, visual art. Tom Killion woodcut prints. Can you describe what those look like, since this is a podcast? And we will link to it, obviously, but
yeah. So woodcut or woodblock prints are these like these chiseled, basically like almost like a stamp. If you can imagine like a stamp that you use these like really fine Japanese tools, traditionally ukiyo-e, I think is the pronunciation for the traditional 19th century Japanese style of woodcut, where they actually chisel a sort of inverted version of the print, like the print that they want, and they chisel it by hand, and they have to make different cuts for different colors often. So you have to like take one cut of one layer of, say, the sky is blue, but the mountains are brown. Like they have to be different cuts of wood themselves. So cherry wood. So Tom Killion is an artist that is born and raised in Mill Valley. He lives in the Marin County, and he is one of the sort of foremost in the West of kind of carrying this tradition on in the West. And so he's been doing this for some time. He has this like crazy German hand cranked press. I visited him while drafting The Way Around, my book, because he's collaborated with Gary Snyder on several books of his. They're buds. And so to answer your question, you go into a studio and there's like all these crazy blocks. You get hit with a big smell of ink. It's a deeply like slow and it's not fast art at all. It's like intentionally very slow and probably maddening. And they're really intricate, beautiful prints. In fact, so when I went to him, I was super poor. I didn't have any money, but I was interviewing him for sort of pre-reporting. I never actually made it too much in the book, but it was a lot about just like his relationship with Gary Snyder, his relationship with Tamalpais. He wrote a book called Tamalpais Walking, which is a huge seminal reference for my book. And on the cover is his art alongside conversations that he and Gary had had. So he sold me a copy, like a really small, super tiny, like a single black print of Mount Tamalpais from Bootjack Canyon, or camp rather. And Bootjack was a place that I had camped several times on my own to do some writing and do some drafting and note taking for the book. And so I don't know, it was like a pretty special visit to meet him in person, and to one day hopefully buy an actual print of his, like a completed print with color, because they're really exquisite. Yeah, he's a really special artist, and I don't know how old he is, but he looks like he could be like in his 50s, but I think he might be in his 60s or 70s. But he just seems like he's on a different plane.
I'm happy for him. That's really good.
Totally. Must be all that ink. Must be all like huffing that oil. The oil based ink.
Can you describe how Tamalpais makes its way into your book and Gary Snyder?
Yeah, I'll be brief. The book is essentially in 3 parts, following this sort of pan-cultural practice of circuitous walking. So instead of linear walking from point A to point B, there's a sort of age-old, several thousand-year-old practice of walking in circles to sort of pay reverence or pay homage to a sacred place or a monastery or a mountain. So I got into the weeds on the sort of cultural foundations and the sort of like implications of embracing a sort of counter narrative to sort of linear walking. I get the second part takes me to Mount Tamalpais. The first part, you go to Western Tibet and you walk around this crazy mountain in Tibet, Mount Kailash. The second part takes you to Mount Tamalpais, where in the 60s, Gary Snyder, Allen Ginsberg, and Philip Whalen put together this 14-mile spiral loop around and up Mount Tamalpais. And so I basically help organize the 50th anniversary of that 1965 walk in the book. It corresponds with all sorts of other layers to the story. My mother had cancer at that point. The woman who sort of was the leader of the walk had been doing it like 100. She had done it at that point 90 times. I think she got to 100. She was also suffering from cancer. And so she was like this proxy to showing up for my own mother's cancer. And so we get into the history of the countercultural history of the Bay Area in the 60s. As we walk around this beautiful storied mountain, and Tom Killion is actually in the book, in my book, a little bit with his dialogue with Gary, because they were really close, and so I mean they have he was literally born, I think, and raised on the slopes of that mountain. So
okay,
yeah.
That's a nice spot to be born and raised on the
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Number 4 is the movie Perfect Days. I have seen this movie based on your recommendation that it is, well, based on you telling me that it is pretty much your favorite movie maybe ever. What is it about this movie? Well, can you kind of describe the movie and then talk about like what is it about this that makes this your favorite movie ever?
Yeah, so not to like infuse more than 5 here, but I wrestled with the movie. I really wanted to like diversify my 5 here. But I was like texting with my brother last night and I was like, what was the seminal, movies that shaped us, man? And he was, because we watched a lot of movies together, and he was like, Captain Ron.
Okay.
Captain Ron, absolutely. He he texted back in like 5 seconds. He's like, Captain Ron, Kurt Russell, of course. Tango and Cash, also Kurt Russell, strangely.
Not strangely.
Not strangely at all. And Blues Brothers, which is actually sort of like one of my favorite movies of all time too. Like I've watched that movie a million times. But so those are movies that really brought like film into my life. But I wouldn't call myself a film nerd by any stretch. But Perfect Days came to me. Well, it was made in 2023, a couple years ago. It's this film set in Tokyo, and it follows the life of a dude that basically wakes up every morning, follows the same exact routine. He's incredibly analog, so like he puts in like tapes of Patti Smith and the Kinks and like Otis Redding. Like he doesn't actually like he reads Faulkner by the light of one bulb in his house at night. And he basically, what his job is cleaning toilets in Tokyo. He's the toilet cleaning guy. And he does it with incredible precision, incredible, immaculate, like full embodied presence, almost as if like it's his sort of spiritual practice. And every lunch, he sits at on like the same bench every lunch, and he takes film, like a point and shoot film photos of the canopy of this park. I did a little research. This is not coming from my own, inherent wisdom or anything, but Komorebi is the name that describes this, like in Japanese, the fleeting light among the canopy. And so the whole movie is sort of centered on the fulcrum of Komorebi, this idea of like the beauty of fleeting beauty, the beauty of fleeting, like ephemerality. And so he basically sits there, eats this little dumb sandwich every day at lunch, and like takes a couple photos of these trees. And so what I love about this movie is originally it was going to be conceived as a documentary film, and it was going to actually it was going to be like an like a film for architecture, an architectural film to document the toilets that were like the toilet designs in this big metropolis. And so, but then they like found the right people for this movie. It's simple. They shot it in like 3 weeks or something. Like it was a super, and it just follows this guy's life. It's like almost Groundhog Day. Like you just go over and over through his life. But over time, you start feeling this tension between his life. He's very quiet, very happy, and you begin to see his niece, I think, starts living with him and starts being a little bit of like an agitation to his order. The niece being the daughter of his sister, who is like the opposite of him, drives a nice car, super stressed out about work, is unhappy in her marriage, etc. And so you start seeing this tension sort of come up, and all these little pelting rocks in his order that he's constructed for himself to keep him safe in some ways. And so I don't know, I just dig it. It's like I love the style. It's quiet, but also artful. It's sort of a perfect movie for me. It really feels like a salve. It feels like I feel restored after I watch it. I watched it like several times. And I'll just want to bring up the last, I don't want to I don't want to ruin the ending, but the final shot is one of my favorite shots in all of film. It's just a shot of his face, and he's driving to work, and he's like, you've experienced all the stuff in the movie that I don't want to give away, but you just see the sort of multitude, the emotional like universe inside his face. He's like crying, but it's sort of joyous and sad and stoic, and he kind of corrects and then he overcorrects, and then he's just, I don't know, it's a long shot. It's a long shot at the end. And it makes me cry every time. It's so good. It's like bittersweet, whatever word that is. It's like both joy and grief and loss and possibility all wrapped into this. Like, you can't even write, like, you can't, there's no language that can actually get to the, that's when performance becomes so cool, and the embodied performance of an actor, you know, it's like, you just can't, right? I don't think you can do that on words. It's like, it's so good. Do you remember that scene?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Now that you mention it, I do. Yeah. I wouldn't say it was like it's not my favorite shot in the history of cinema, but I actually
don't know that? I'm not sure.
I don't know what mine is. So, but yeah, no, it's incredible. And you have to think about like the guy they hired to pull that off, you know, and like, this is how, you know, we know you can do this. And this is also going to be our last shot in the film. Like, that's crazy.
I know. Yeah.
So it's like, why do you think it grabbed you so much? Like, it's such a quiet film, you know. It's not like, it's not like Captain Ron, for sure. But it's such a quiet film that like I could see a majority of, say, Americans falling asleep while watching it, you know, or being like, I'm bored, what else is on Netflix, you know. But what do you think? Why do you think it works for you so well?
I think it's that I feel that too. I don't want to, like, you know, critique that, because I feel I'm like ADHD adjacent. I'm, you know, reading 7 books at once, and, you know, you and I went and watched X, you know, Fast and Furious X one, you know, like that's like the exact opposite, and it's joyous also. Okay, let's be honest. But for me, particularly right now in my life, any chance that I can get to, whether external or internal, ways to reset my nervous system, to slow down, to actually, like, what's, you know, to, I guess, savor, is that the word, you know? Mm-hmm. Is there a way that in the maelstrom of our days that are complicated, work, you know, I think a lot about work these days, you know, and writing also, but how might we be able to, you know, you can meet like a nonprofit ED who's doing, like, quote, the most honorable work, you know, for the planet or for people, and he's a complete asshole. And then you can meet like a, you know,
what's his name? Yeah, like, I'm sorry.
We'll leave that, for example. We're gonna leave that anonymous. Or, you know, or you can meet someone who's, you know, the post office man just walked by, and he's like the sweetest man on earth, you know. And so, all I want to say is, it's not necessarily, what does William Stafford say? It's not like necessarily what you do, but how you do it, you know? Mm-hmm. And I think this movie really gets to that. For me, it's been helpful and instructive and a North Star in terms of thinking about work, not only as like what you do so that you have a cool resume, but the style that you do it, and also how you treat people while doing that. And this man is just a beautiful, like, bodhisattva toilet cleaner, and he does it he, for some reason, and you don't quite know exactly what happened in his life. That's where he's found himself, and he's actually created a beautiful sanctuary because of it.
Yeah, it's like a celebration of someone who's actually just like doing good work simply, in, you know, amongst, or maybe in contrast to what gets more attention these days, which is people trying to make money or trying to blah blah blah. Like, as you were saying, the only other character I can think of that's like, or this film that's very similar, I've mentioned this to you before, is Paterson with Adam Driver, which is a Jim Jarmusch film, and he's just like, it's such a slow, quiet film, and he's a driver, a bus driver, and he writes poetry like in his basement, you know, and he's such a chill guy, but it's very, very similar in my mind to the character in Perfect Days, and also really pays off at the end too. But
you turned me on to that movie. I watched it and loved it. I don't know if I ever texted you about it, but I adore that movie. Yeah, and Adam Driver's like, you know, to have a beer with him. Wow.
Oh boy, yeah. Yeah, no, it's fantastic. So both those films are like super super interesting to me in that way. But I gotta be in the mood for that. Like, okay, I'll just have this very calming thing.
I mean, on a Tuesday I'm piping up, I'm queuing up Captain Ron. On a Friday I'm queuing up Perfect Days. So it's like we contain multitudes.
Yes, I was just gonna say that. Speaking of containing multitudes, number 5 is a food. I'm just gonna let you say what it is. I think this is great. I love this so much. This is on your list.
Okay, so we're going to end with the finale here. The fifth and final item of creative expression is Salsa Verde Doritos. So I know all of you who are listening are like, oh yeah, your mouth is watering right now. So let me back up a second. This is sort of full circle. When I was growing up, sort of my first obsession, and this was another sort of like a B-side on this list that was really difficult to pare down to 5. I was a sort of a competitive inline skater, which is embarrassing / real. But I got into like, rails and flips on rollerblades back in the 90s, right? Which a lot of kids did. Also skateboarded, but inline skates stole my heart. During that time, I basically fed myself on like cream soda, white rice, and at some point when they started like introducing Salsa Verde, I tried to look up this like when they were introduced to the economy or the marketplace, and I think it was early 2000s. So that was right around the time where I like got away from skating and got into college and moved a little bit, transitioned. But so eating trash and skating, that's where like this flavor profile came into my life. They're this exquisite heat factor that's like a little bit edgy, kind of like sriracha. Like when you have sriracha, you're like, this is hot. I don't want to tell people it's hot, but it's like got a little zing. These Salsa Verde Doritos have a little zing. Another like asterisk to this was I used to teach English during college to children of immigrant families. I would teach English using my Spanish and have this at this middle school, and all these students would come in eating Flaming Hot Cheetos. And all my students, all of them, and we would snack together, and I would occasionally bring my Salsa Verde Doritos, and I was like street cred with these kids. They were like, okay, Nick's got it, like he knows, he understands. But I would also come like hungover, and I was a mess. Like I was experimenting with alcohol and drugs at that point, of course, as we often do in that time.
In college, I'm so scandalized. What?
Who does that? Yeah. Who does that? And how, like the relationship between like substance abuse and shitty dietary choices, like there's a correlation, perhaps.
Yeah, youth.
Youth.
It's the Venn diagram overlap there. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So anyway, that's a long story. Tee up these Doritos, which fast forward to literally a month ago, or I think several weeks ago. When this book came out a year ago, I was called to be in conversation with Rob Macfarlane, who we brought up earlier. I feel like I'm name dropping, but I can bring this story up. It has a longer tail. I'm invited to have a conversation with Rob Macfarlane. His new book is A River Alive, a beautiful book worth reading, everybody. We met in Minneapolis and had a conversation in front of a live audience last June. That was one of the highlights of my life. I was incredibly nervous. I researched everything about him, including like the middle names of his children. Like I knew everything I could about this dude's life and his corpus. So we had this beautiful evening together. Was barely hanging on, intellectually, but got through it. Got a lot of positive feedback. Several months go by, and I get a text from him, a WhatsApp, saying, "Hey, I'm coming through town again. I'm coming back to the States. I got some lectures in Seattle. Driving to meet the late Barry Lopez's wife in Eugene, and working with the Mackenzie River Trust on some river-related things. But I want to stop. I have a few days in between, and was hoping to stop at Mount Hood and climb and run around and up and around Mount Hood. Would you want to join me?" And so I was like, yeah, let's do it. I hadn't done any like mountaineering for a long time. In fact, I had to lean on Brendan. I had to lean on you for some gear because I just hadn't thrown an ice axe around for a while. But I was like, yeah, sure, I got this, no problem. And so I drive over there. I drive to the government camp at the base of Mount Hood, and I join him and a couple buddies, and we do this. We climb Hood. We spend a few other days running around the trails, Salmon River, and the PCT's right there. We had this exquisite 5 days together. And anyway, we climb Hood, and this comes back full circle to Doritos. So we're having this moment. I'm just, day 3 or 4 of hanging out with Rob Macfarlane. No big deal. Sharing like a loft, like a day bed next to his bed, and like we're not too far sharing a bathroom. Like we're in the it's full on. And I'll just say that he's like one of the nicest dudes you'll ever meet. I mean, he's like, unbelievably unpretentious, self, deflecting of any sort of praise, has helped me in myriad ways, like in terms of, getting the book in front of other people, just an incredibly generous human. And we just became dear friends after these days. But so we're sitting after we go up Hood, we come down, we go at midnight, come down, we glissade together, and we're sitting at the Timberline Lodge. And that morning, the morning before we went to the supermarket or the little mini mart, and he was kind of searching for some crisps, as he would call it. And he found these Doritos, these Salsa Verde Doritos. And I was like, yeah, you should try those. You'll like those. Because he also pocketed a couple bird's eye peppers that he had in his pocket. He always takes climbing. He had like these really hot, like really fucking hot peppers. Oh. And he gave me a couple. And so we had those in our pockets too while we were climbing Hood. But we both had these bags of Salsa Verde Doritos that we didn't actually pop until the end. So we both get these, and I flashback, I hadn't had a bag for like 20 years or something, but I was like, yeah, those are good, Rob, get those. God bless America. And we go up and down Hood. We're sitting there in the sun afterwards, kind of looking out at Hood and looking out at the other volcanoes in the area, and just having just basking in the sun and tired. And he breaks open the Doritos, and I break out mine, and I say to Rob, I say, God, I've never eaten these not high, Rob, or something. So, like, never has there been a moment where I've eaten these not high, and it tumbled out of my mouth before I knew. I forgot that I was hanging out with Rob Macfarlane, which I know, like, we had become comfortable with each other, but that was this new, new zone of comfort with this guy. And it slipped out of my mouth, and I was like, oh, put that back in. But at that point, we all laughed, and he got it, and it was fine. Of course it was fine. But, yeah. So we're sitting there eating Doritos with Rob Macfarlane, and it was one of the better days of my life.
I mean, you're already eating Doritos. It's not like it's like super that highbrow, but it's fantastic. Well, what did he like? Was he into him?
He was into him. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, he was into
that's
him.
Fantastic, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of my, because he's British, we should say, but was just part of the self-deprecating / humility part, but also not a country known for spicy food, not a culture, I guess. The country is now known more for spicy food, especially London, but
right.
Salsa Verde that might shock a lot of people.
I said that
palate.
I said that to him. I was like, "Oh, Brits, they don't like spice, right?" And he sort of was like, "No, actually, we're not stuck in the 19th century. We have unbelievable diversity in food." And so I was like, "Cool, man. Yep, absolutely."
Right. Gordon Ramsay had the roughest time of anyone on Hot Ones. I think that's something I know. And he's not representative of the entire country, obviously, but boy, he got rocked.
It's an incredibly uncomfortable Hot Ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy, that's wonderful, man. Yeah. I mean, so how often are you? So you haven't had them in 20 years. Did you buy another bag recently? Do you have a new? Do you have a new memory attached to these that you're like, I'm gonna go back and relive my time hanging with Rob just with a small bag of Salsa Verde Doritos?
I don't think I've gone backpacking or big mountaineering since that. I've gone a bunch of big day walks, but I think I've got a couple big multi days coming up, and I'm gonna pocket some of these Doritos. Yeah.
I mean, let me just also say that you don't have to do any strenuous activity in order to deserve Salsa Verde Doritos, dude. You can just...
I mean, Zelda, like, yeah.
Right. Breathing. Yeah.
Just being a human. Right.
Yeah, just do it. Yeah.
Well, I did, not to, again, I was doing my homework like a good, student does before this call, and I was like looking up the sort of interesting factoids about the Salsa Verde kind of line of, because Frito-Lay owns them. Side note, I dated a woman, a girl in high school that is now like way up in the line at Frito-Lay. So I should actually like text her or call her and be like, hey, just so you know, Salsa Verde chips made it on the top 5. But what was I going to say? I think that I don't know how they're going to land. I don't know how they're going to land in my life now. But I think that they're in for life for sure.
Okay, good. Yeah.
Oh, and what I found also was that they have like natural chicken flavor in them. There's no, people were like up in arms about them having 0 cilantro in them apparently, because it's the flavor profile is engineered to like be a doppelganger of like tomatillo, I guess. But tomatillo, like a central ingredient in tomatillo is cilantro, and there isn't any cilantro flavoring. But there is natural chicken flavor, just so you know, vegetarian Brendan.
Oh, that's interesting.
Rob is also a vegetarian, so I hope I don't know. I don't know if they're technically... I didn't bring it up.
Like, hey, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Huh. Well, I'm going to miss out on those. It's great. Yeah, you should send this to your friend and see what she says. I'm sure she'll love that. And like, oh, good, we'll sell a few bags of those things finally. Based on this totally obscure podcast.
20% off at checkout, everyone. Triolo.
Yeah.
Triolo Verde 20.
We should sponsor that podcast. Yeah. A lot of Doritos, a lot of chips have MSG in them too that people have varying responses to historically, but I'm a huge fan of MSG. So but when they're like, oh, I get headaches after I eat at Chinese restaurants, I'm like, well, what about after you eat a bag of Doritos? You okay?
Right. They're like, also yes.
Yeah. Oh yeah, but yeah. Awesome, dude. This is so fun. I am. Somebody said that I should go through the list of 5 things at the end of the podcast as well. It'll be in the show notes, but so we have the book Spell of the Sensuous, music, Darkside's Psychic album, Tom Killion's Woodcut prints. Got all these visual aids. Yeah. The movie Perfect Days and Salsa Verde Doritos, which you're going to get a bag of from me sometime soon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dude, thanks so much for taking the time. This was super fun.
Thanks, Brendan. Appreciate you.